Hey, Cookies here. We're going to go over another Resto Shaman Log. First thing I want to do is just some clarifications and some fixes from the first Resto Shaman Log that we went over, because I got asked some questions about some, of the choices that I was making of describing certain abilities or describing how things work. So we're going to go over a little bit of that. So why do we use 2 Riptides before Cloudburst? Especially with the new Swelling Currents, I believe it's called, conduit. When we drop Cloudburst Totem, it buffs our next 2 Riptide healing waves or healing surges. So a lot of people were saying, why use the 2 Riptides before Cloudburst if you should be dropping Cloudburst and then, using those empowered Riptides rather. And the reason for that is, this isn't a perfect example, but the reason is because Riptide's only a 6-second cooldown. We can see that here. The 6-second recharge, you have 2 charges. And Cloudburst lasts for 15 seconds when we drop it. So you can see that here, the tooltip lasts 15 seconds. That means if we use both of our Riptides and then we do our classic like Healing Rain, Wellspring, that kind of stuff into our Cloudburst. So we drop our 2 Riptides, we drop our Healing Rain, we drop our Cloudburst. By the time we drop that Cloudburst, that first Riptide that we used is already coming back off cooldown. And then in the middle of the Cloudburst Totem, you get that second Riptide back, and then at the end of the Cloudburst Totem, you can even sometimes get a 3rd Riptide back. So you're essentially fitting, 4 to 5 Riptides into your Cloudburst Totem that can still, those 2 to 3 that you use inside your Cloudburst Totem can still be empowered, but you're getting 4 to 5 total Riptides cast like in your Cloudburst, rather than just saving all your Riptide charges, dropping Cloudburst, using 2 Riptides. So it's just a lot of extra healing, and that's why we get those Riptides on cooldown before Cloudburst, even with the whole empowered ability thing. The next thing is adding Wellspring into the mix. This is something that was just an oversight on my part, and I didn't remember to include it. So Wellspring is a pretty common talent that you're going to see popping up now in raids and whatnot. So if you're taking this talent, the way you want to use it, this is actually the incorrect way of using it. The way we want to use it is we just mix it into the 2 Riptides, Healing Rain, Wellspring, Cloudburst. So what that's going to allow us to do is, because Wellspring kind of shoots out in an arc from you, it actually has a delay before it reaches people and heals them. So you can throw Wellspring out and then drop Cloudburst, and all of the healing that you do with that Wellspring will still feed into that Cloudburst, even though you cast it before. So again, just one more time, you're going to do your 2 Riptides, get them on cooldown, drop Healing Rain, Wellspring into Cloudburst Totem. And that should be like your early rotation into every single Cloudburst, just about, especially because Wellspring's only a 20-second cooldown, which means it can pretty much fit into every single Cloudburst Totem that you have down. The next thing, and I guess the last kind of clarification point, is casts during your Cloudburst Totem do not matter nearly as much as the way I kind of made it maybe appear in the previous video. What really matters when understanding Cloudburst Totem is what you're casting before Cloudburst Totem, because the prep work into Cloudburst Totem is what's going to do the most amount of like feeding into your Cloudburst. The cast during Cloudburst should not, like, you shouldn't be thinking too much on feeding your Cloudburst and doing all these things, except for when you're setting it up. So it should be the setup, you drop Cloudburst, and then you just continue to play as normal, and then detonate your Cloudburst when you need to, or have it auto-detonate itself, everything like that. So it's just important understanding that whole concept that the prep work that goes into casting Cloudburst, that's the part that matters. The stuff you do during Cloudburst, spamming chain heal or single targeting people with tidal waves that you have available, or casting more Riptides, all of that's totally fine. It's not, you don't need to be super specific. It's just the 2 Riptides into Healing Rain, into Wellspring, into Cloudburst. That's the chunk that really matters to get right every single time. So just wanted to clear that up. And then next we're going to go into a couple more concepts in Warcraft logs of what we can look at for improving as a Resto Shaman and things to watch out for. So the first thing is Unleash Life usage. The way we want to typically use Unleash Life is you're either just going to, it's a 15-second cooldown, so you're just gonna constantly press it. Every time it's up, every time Unleash Life is available, you need to press it. There should be almost very little reason to ever hold it unless you have High Tide and you're trying to like stack up a big chain heal for an incoming boss ability. But outside of that, you should just be using Unleash Life on cooldown, and then you use it with Chain Heal if the raid is, you know, at a suitable level and taking damage, for you to be able to utilize Chain Heal to heal multiple targets. And then if the raid isn't, you know, taking damage and the raid is nice and healthy, or you just don't want to press Chain Heal for whatever reason, then you use Riptide. So it's always just Unleash Life should be used into Chain Heal if the raid needs, you know, to be topped off as like a group-wide thing, and then you use Riptide otherwise. Even if people are full health, you still Unleash Life, Riptide. That's the best way to use it in those two scenarios. The last thing is you could use like Healing Surge if you really need to spot heal somebody or like save someone's life. But again, Chain Heal for raid damage. Otherwise, just use Riptide with Unleash Life on cooldown. I think we can use a quick example of this. So I think Artificer Zymox is a really good example. So there are debuffs that go out on Artificer Zymox called, let me just find out what it is called really quick. Sorry if there's noise in the background, my cat is playing with a bag or something. It is gonna be, where is this? I know it's called Withering Touch, and I'm not seeing it pop up here. I'm trying to see why I cannot see it. Oh, it's because we're zoomed in, that's why. So we have these Withering Touch debuffs. They happen during phase 2. This is a good example of when you would press Unleash Life and then Riptide the players who have the debuff, because then that Unleash Life Riptide, that empowered Riptide, is going to get a huge, because it also empowers the heal over time effect, so it's just going to get a huge benefit into healing this player that has this debuff. So, and then we're going to go into the kind of topic that we're going to cover today in Warcraft Log specifically, which is target selection and how to go about seeing if you are properly targeting your abilities, such as Healing Rain. So the first one we'll talk about is just that. We'll talk about Healing Rain. And the way we're going to usually do this through logs is you're just going to click on the shaman that we're going to view, and this is just a shaman in my guild. So we'll be viewing his log. And I think Artificer Zymox is a good example fight because we aren't completely stacked up all the time on Artificer Zymox, but it's a nice kind of like, it's kind of like a loose stack in that fight, I would say. So targeting your Healing Rain on the correct spots on the floor is very important and actually can make or break the difference of your HPS. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to cast, and then we're going to click on Healing Rain, and we're going to click this little plus button over here to add it to the timeline. And then we switch it over to healing at the top, and we can, I believe, just click on Healing Rain. And then what we do here is this is just showing who got healed by Healing Rain and all that, but that's not super important. What we're going to look at is each individual Healing Rain. So all we do is we just take the mouse and we just click on the Healing Rain and then drag until we're just about at the next Healing Rain that we cast, but not going over it. And what this will do is show who was healed just by this one Healing Rain that was cast. So we can see, and what we're looking for here is a few different things. So the first thing is Healing Rain should always be hitting at least 6 players. So do we see that here? Yes, there is, you know, multiple, there's way more than 6 players getting hit. This is at least, what, about 10 or 11 getting hit. And then the next thing that's important, because, you know, you might have a bunch of players getting hit, but some of them may not be getting any healing received because they get hit, you know, they tick from it once and then they step out of the Healing Rain, or it was in the wrong spot, or the raid was moving. And the way we check that is these hits numbers right here, and we can actually click hits and it will show who was hit by the Healing Rain the most amount of times. So we can see here that 5 hits is going to be the maximum. This varies on haste, but for right now at the beginning of the expansion, most Shaman's Healing Rain should only be doing 5 hits anyways. So if people were hit by Healing Rain 5 times, that means they were standing in it the entire duration. And then the other important thing that we can look at here is the overheal percentage, and that's showing how much people were overhealed, but the main thing is the total, or I guess the average down here, was 23%, and then you can also see the total healing that your Healing Rain did. So what you can do is you can kind of compare and contrast this number right here, this total number, and this overheal number, and we can reset the zoom, go to a new Healing Rain. So we'll just grab like from this one right here, you just click and drag, and then we can look at 23k healing with a 14% overheal. And it looks like we hit more than 6 players. Some players were hit, you know, 5 times, that's good. And then we can reset the zoom again and check another one and just kind of compare and contrast those numbers to see how our Healing Rains, if there's any that are significantly lower than others. So this one, for instance, hit It looks like the whole raid was like nice and healthy and not taking any damage, and that's why it's showing 0%, but people are getting hit, you know, 2, 3, 5 times, but it's 100% overheal, so it's just not counting anything. So this is a healing raid where we could go in and look at, was there people taking damage, or was it just literally the entire raid was just completely healthy, and maybe, you know, maybe this is just feeding into a cloudburst or something. But that's how you check your healing rains. Make sure that you're hitting enough people. You want to be hitting 6, and then you also want those hit counters to be nice and high towards 5. And if they're not nice and high towards 5, and you have like none that are at 5, then you probably misplaced your healing rain and missed a few, you know, ticks of the heal. And then the last thing that we're going to check in this video is our Riptide targets. So the way we want to always be utilizing Riptide, and the way we can check this, is just by, again, going to our healing done, and then click off healing rain, and we're going to go to Riptide, and this will show, let me see if I have this right. Okay, cool. So this will show, you know what actually might be a better way of looking at this instead of healing is we're going to go to buffs, and then we will go to the raid, we'll click off the shaman, and we'll just filter to Riptide. And what this will do is show our uptime on Riptide. And the major things we want to look out for here is tanks should pretty much have the most amount of uptime on Riptide, especially if they're both taking damage, but more consistently, the active tank should be the one who has like 100% uptime on Riptide while they're tanking the boss. And then there's some fights where both tanks are constantly taking damage, and in that case, they should both have as close to 100% uptime as possible. And then you can check, you know, those debuffed players. Like we can go in here and go to debuffs. We can click off all this stuff. I'll just kind of reset this fully. And then we're going to look for that Withering Touch. And then we will click on, let's say Beastoid, because he was hit by this. And then we can see here at 2 minutes and 30 seconds he was affected by the debuff. And we just want to see if during these windows here, if he was affected by our Riptide at all. So we can click on this, zoom in again to this is just the timeline of the debuff. And then we will go to, we can go ahead and click on plus so that we can see it. We go back to buffs. I know I'm kind of filtering through this pretty fast, so I apologize. And then we click on all sources up here. This is very important if we have multiple shamans. We're going to click on the shaman that we want to look at if they were using it. And here we can see that there is no uptime on Riptide, which means that Riptide was never cast on Beastoid, even though he had this, like, you know, 20 or 30 second dot on him. When 100% you should be putting Riptide on the players who have this debuff. So that's how you check if you're, you know, healing those players with the debuff. Another way to check is you could just go in the replay and check who you're targeting with Riptide during those times. And that's the biggest thing. Tanks should always have a lot of high uptime on Riptide, and then debuffed players in specific fights where there's, you know, some kind of single target ability that ticks players for damage. And then that pretty much covers everything. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope I helped clarify some questions that people might have had from the previous video and kind of elaborated a little bit more on my reasoning behind why I think, you know, this is the correct playstyle. And again, healing is all about decision making, so it's up in the air with a lot of these things, and that's why we play the game, and that's why we analyze logs, and that's why we think about healing through different lenses and whatnot. So thank you for watching. Hope it was helpful. Follow the stream, go subscribe to the YouTube or something, and have a wonderful day.